Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dusty, torchlit corridors of ancient Egyptian dungeons, where the air hums with secrets and the walls seem to whisper judgments from the gods themselves. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a crumbling stone staircase, the faint drip of water echoing from somewhere deep below. The scent of stale earth and old linen wraps around you like a shroud. It's not exactly a five-star resort, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this if you're allergic to sand or scorpions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time, I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just anywhere, you're in the heart of ancient Egypt, where justice wasn't just a slap on the wrist but a full-on divine smackdown. The dungeons here aren't like the medieval castles you're picturing, with rusty chains and squeaky rats. No, these are carved deep into the bedrock, sometimes beneath temples or near the Nile's muddy banks. The air is thick, heavy with the weight of thousands of years of law and order. You're walking where thieves, rebels, and the occasional unlucky scribe ended up when they crossed a pharaoh or pissed off a priest. And trust me, the Egyptians had a knack for making you regret your life choices in ways that were, let's say, creatively unhinged. Let's set the scene. It's around 1500 BCE, and you've just been hauled in for, say, sneaking a loaf of barley bread from a temple offering. Rookie mistake. The guards, with their kohl-rimmed eyes and bronze-tipped spears, aren't here to negotiate. They shove you down a narrow passage, and the first thing you notice is the texture underfoot, gritty, like someone decided sand was the perfect dungeon carpet. Spoiler, it's not just for aesthetics. Sand was a big deal in Egyptian punishment. It could be a bed, a blindfold, or even a slow, scratchy way to remind you who's in charge. Historians note that sand was often used to immobilize prisoners, poured over limbs to pin them in place without needing fancy shackles. Cheap, effective, and everywhere, Egypt's ultimate multi-tool. But here's the quirky bit, not every dungeon was a grim hole in the ground. Some were temporary, like holding pens for festival troublemakers. Archaeologists have found evidence of these pop-up prisons near Karnak, where drunkards or pickpockets were tossed to sober up. Imagine a makeshift cell with palm frond walls, guarded by a guy who's more annoyed than menacing. You're sitting there, nursing a hangover, while a priest outside mutters about your soul's imminent demotion to eternal dishwasher in the afterlife. It's almost comical, until you realize the Egyptians didn't mess around with repeat offenders. One wrong move, and you're not just scrubbing dishes, you're scrubbing your existence. Now, you're probably wondering, who decided what punishment you got? Historians still argue whether dungeon sentences were purely a priestly call or if local governors had a say. The mainstream view leans toward a mix, pharaohs set the vibe, priests added the divine spin, and regional officials handled the grunt work. You're at the mercy of this bureaucratic trifecta, and they're not exactly handing out get-out-of-jail-free cards. As you shuffle deeper into the dungeon, the torchlight flickers, casting shadows that look suspiciously like Anubis judging your snack-stealing soul. The walls are etched with hieroglyphs, some cursing your name, others promising redemption if you survive. Spoiler, survival's not the default setting here. You pause, feeling the chill of the stone against your back. The dungeon's not just a place, it's a statement. Egypt's all about balance, Ma'at, their cosmic harmony thing. Screw that up, and you're not just a criminal, you're a chaos agent. That's why punishments here feel so personal. They're not just locking you up, they're fixing the universe, one miserable prisoner at a time. You smirk, thinking maybe you should have offered that stolen bread to Osiris instead of eating it. Too late now. The guard's glare says your next stop's gonna be less, time out, and more, eternal regret. And yeah, that's the Egyptian way, justice with a side of existential dread. So, you're stuck here, sand in your sandals, wondering what's next. The dungeon's just the start, a gritty welcome mat to a world of peculiar punishments. You're not alone, though. Echoes of other prisoners, some muttering, some eerily silent, remind you this place is packed with stories. Each cell, each scratch on the wall, holds a tale of someone who thought they could outsmart the gods. Newsflash, the gods always win, or at least the priests say so. You take a deep breath, trying not to sneeze from the dust. Whatever's coming, it's gonna, or as the Egyptians might say, it's gonna be a wild ride through the underworld's budget Airbnb. Section 2. You're still in the belly of this ancient Egyptian dungeon, the air so thick with dust it's like breathing a sandstorm's leftovers. The torchlight barely cuts through the gloom, and your sandals crunch against that ever-present sand floor, gritty, stubborn, and definitely not vacuum-friendly. You're starting to get why the guards didn't bother with fancy locks. The sand itself is your jailer, clinging to your skin, weighing down your every step. It's not just dirt, it's a punishment, and you're about to learn how the Egyptians turned something as basic as sand into a masterclass in misery. Picture yourself shoved into a low-ceilinged cell, the walls rough with chisel marks from some poor soul who carved it centuries ago. The guards, with their "I'd rather be at a Nile beer festival" expressions, toss you in and walk away. No chains, no bars, just a pile of sand dumped at the entrance, heavy enough to block your escape. You try to push it, but it's like wrestling a really uncooperative beanbag. Mainstream history backs this up. Egyptians used sand as a restraint, especially in temporary or rural dungeons. It was cheap, abundant, and doubled as a psychological jab, reminding you that Egypt's landscape itself was against you. You're not just trapped, you're trapped by the very ground you walk on. Ouch. But here's the quirky twist, sand wasn't always about locking you in. Sometimes, it was the punishment itself. Imagine being told to lie still while guards pour fine desert sand over your arms and legs, pinning you like a bug in a collector's case. Not enough to crush you, but enough to make every twitch an itchy nightmare. Some texts hint at this for minor crimes, like dodging taxes or mouthing off to a scribe. You're stuck there, counting grains like some ancient insomnia cure, while the guards chuckle about your sand spa treatment. It's almost funny, until you realize you're the punchline, and sneezing means a face full of desert. You shift, trying to find a sand-free spot to sit, but good luck with that. The cell's designed to make comfort a distant memory. The sand's not just on the floor, it's in the air, in your hair, probably plotting to invade your dreams. You wonder how long you're stuck here, and that's when you overhear a guard muttering about Ma'at's balance. That's the Egyptian obsession with cosmic order, and you've apparently thrown it out of whack by, say, borrowing that temple bread from Section 1. Historians still argue whether sand punishments were purely practical or had a ritual vibe, like burying your chaos to restore harmony. Either way, you're the chaos, and the sand's here to fix you. Let's pause for a second. You're probably thinking, okay, sand sucks, but it's not exactly medieval torture. Fair point. But imagine being stuck in this cell for days, no water, no breeze, just you and the sand slowly grinding your sanity into dust. The Egyptians didn't need spiked chairs or thumbscrews, they had patience and a desert's worth of grit. You try to distract yourself, maybe humming a tune about papyrus and bad life choices, but the sand's in your throat now, making every cough a gritty reminder of your predicament. Joke's on you for thinking you could outsmart a civilization that built pyramids with math and spite. The cell's walls offer no comfort, just more hieroglyphs you can't read, probably insults about your bread-stealing skills. You squint, noticing faint scratch marks, like someone tried to claw their way out. Spoiler, they didn't make it. The sand's not just a physical trap, it's a mental one, forcing you to face your own helplessness. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen you heard about in some marketplace gossip? Yeah, you trade it for a sand-free nap right now. But no, you're here, marinating in Egypt's least cozy Airbnb, wondering if the gods are taking bets on how long you'll last. You hear a shuffle outside, another prisoner, maybe, or just the wind stirring more sand into your life. The guards don't bother checking on you, they know the sand's doing its job. You try to stay positive, telling yourself it could be worse. At least you're not in one of those rumored crocodile pits, yet. But the thought doesn't help much when every breath feels like inhaling a beach. You lean back, sand crunching under you, and close your eyes. Maybe sleep will help you forget the itch. Or maybe you'll dream of a world where justice doesn't involve a desert's worth of exfoliation. Either way, you're stuck, and the sand's not letting go anytime soon. Section 3. You're still hunched in that sandy cell, the grit now a second skin you didn't sign up for, and the dim torchlight feels like it's mocking your hope for a quick release. The air's heavy, smelling of old stone and older regrets, and you're starting to think that stolen temple bread wasn't worth the cosmic timeout. But just as you're settling into your sandy misery, the cell door, or rather, the sand pile, shifts. Two guards with linen kilts and zero patience haul you up, their bronze armbands glinting like they're flexing their authority. You're not headed for freedom, though. Oh no, you're off to face something far scarier than sand, a divine tribunal, where the gods themselves, or at least their priestly fan club, decide if you're dungeon material or destined for something worse. You're marched through a maze of corridors, the walls now smoother, etched with images of jackal-headed Anubis and stern-faced Osiris, who's probably already judging your snack-stealing soul. You arrive at a chamber lit by flickering oil lamps, the air thick with incense that smells like a mix of myrrh and, you're in deep trouble. A panel of priests, draped in white linen and looking like they've never smiled, stares you down. This is no regular courtroom. In ancient Egypt, justice wasn't just human, it was divine. Historical records, like those from the New Kingdom, show that serious crimes, especially against temples or pharaohs, were judged with the gods' input, or so the priests claimed. You're standing before a tribunal where Osiris, lord of the underworld, supposedly calls the shots through his earthly mouthpieces. No pressure, right? Here's the quirky bit, the priests don't just grill you about your crime, they read omens. One of them tosses a handful of sacred ibis feathers into a bronze bowl, muttering about how their pattern spells your guilt. You're half expecting them to pull out a magic 8-ball next. Some fringe accounts suggest these rituals could get wild, with priests interpreting everything from cloud shapes to the Nile's ripples to decide your fate. You stifle a nervous laugh, imagining Osiris face-palming at the feather toss. But the priest's glares shut you up fast. You're not just on trial, you're on trial for disrupting Ma'at, that cosmic balance the Egyptians were obsessed with. Stealing bread? That's not just theft, it's a middle finger to the universe. You shift on your feet, sand still trickling from your clothes like a bad souvenir. The head priest, with a leopard skin shawl that screams, "I'm important," recites your crime in a voice that could lull you to sleep if it weren't so terrifying. He says your theft angered Hathor, goddess of, apparently, temple snacks. You're tempted to argue that Hathor probably has bigger fish to fry, but the room's vibe says sarcasm equals eternal detention. Historians still argue whether these tribunals were legit divine channels or just priestly power plays to keep the masses in line. Either way, you're the one sweating under Osiris's metaphorical gavel, and the priests aren't handing out mercy coupons. The punishment phase kicks in, and you're bracing for something grim. The priests whisper among themselves, occasionally glancing at a papyrus scroll that's probably your rap sheet. You catch words like dungeon and penance, and your stomach does a flip. They decide you're not getting off with a slap on the wrist, or a sand bath, like last time. Instead, you're sentenced to a deeper dungeon, one reserved for those who need a closer chat with the gods. You try to look brave, but your knees are doing their own little dance. Joke's on you for thinking a loaf of bread wouldn't land you in divine HR's bad books. As the guards grab your arms, you notice the chamber's walls again, hieroglyphs of scales and feathers, symbols of Judgment Day in the afterlife. It hits you, this tribunal isn't just about now, it's a rehearsal for when you face Osiris for real. You remember that marketplace gossip about crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier? Yeah, you'd slather it on if it meant dodging this divine audit. The guards drag you back into the corridors, the incense fading but the weight of judgment sticking like sand in your sandals. You're headed deeper, where the god's wrath feels less metaphorical and more like a bad Yelp review for your soul. You stumble along, the priest's chants echoing behind you. The tribunal's over, but the verdict's just the start. You're not just a thief anymore, you're a cosmic troublemaker, and Egypt's dungeons are about to school you in regret. The air grows colder, the walls tighter, and you wonder if Osiris ever takes a day off. Probably not. You sigh, sand crunching underfoot, and brace for whatever divine detention looks like. Spoiler, it's not going to be a picnic, unless picnics involve scorpions and existential dread. Section 4. You're being hustled down another dim corridor, the guard's grip on your arms as unyielding as the stone walls closing in around you. The air's cooler now, but it carries a sharp, almost metallic tang that makes your nose wrinkle. The echo of the priest's chants from that divine tribunal still lingers in your head, their words about Osiris and Ma'at branding you as a cosmic troublemaker. You're not sure what's worse, the god's disapproval or the fact that your sandals are still packed with sand from that gritty cell. Either way, you're headed deeper into the dungeon, and the vibe's shifting from bad life choices to you might actually regret stealing that bread forever. The guards shove you into a new cell, this one smaller, with a low ceiling that forces you to hunch like you're auditioning for a grumpy cat meme. The floor's still sandy, because, of course, Egypt's got a sand surplus, but something else catches your eye, a faint scuttling sound, like tiny claws tap dancing in the shadows. You squint, heart sinking as you spot them, scorpions. Not one or two, but a whole squad, their curved tails glinting in the torchlight like they're plotting your personal downfall. Welcome to your new punishment, where your cellmates have stingers and zero chill. Historical records from the Ramesside period mention scorpions as a go-to for minor offenders, especially in temple dungeons. They weren't always lethal, but they were a stinging reminder to stay in line. You're basically in nature's version of a timeout. Now, here's the quirky tidbit, the Egyptians didn't just toss scorpions in for kicks. Some fringe sources claim priests saw them as agents of Serket, the scorpion goddess who could protect or punish your little cellmate crew. They're not random, they're a divine sting operation. You're supposed to reflect on your crimes while dodging their pincers, which is like meditating during a dodgeball game. You edge to the cell's corner, trying to channel your inner ninja, but one scorpion skitters way too close, and you swear it's giving you side-eye. You mutter, "Nice Serket, good Serket," hoping flattery works on divine bugs. Spoiler, it doesn't. You're stuck playing "Don't Get Stung," while the guards outside probably bet on how long you'll last. Classic Egypt, turning pest control into a personality test. You try to sit, but the floor's a minefield of tiny terrors. Every move kicks up sand, which, you're learning, is the dungeon's MVP. It's not just gritty, it's a scorpion highway, letting them zip around like they own the place. You're tempted to make a joke about needing a scorpion-free Airbnb, but the sting risk keeps your sarcasm in check. Historians still argue whether scorpion punishments were more symbolic or practical. Did they aim to scare you straight or just save on guard salaries? Either way, you're the test subject, and the scorpions are acing their job. You spot one climbing the wall, its tail arched like it's mocking your bread-stealing skills. Great, even the bugs know you're a cosmic screw-up. The cell's walls offer no comfort, just more hieroglyphs you can't read, probably prayers to Serket or warnings about not petting the wildlife. You notice faint scratches, maybe from someone else who tried to reason with their stinger squad. You're not feeling super optimistic about their success rate. The air's getting stuffy, and every scuttle sends your pulse racing. You remember that tribunal from Section 3, where Osiris's priests gave you the divine stink eye. This scorpion sleepover feels like their idea of character building. You trade it for another sand bath in a heartbeat, but Egypt's justice system doesn't do refunds. You lean against the wall, careful not to squish anything with a vendetta. The scorpions aren't the only challenge, it's the mental game. Every rustle makes you flinch, and the isolation's creeping in. You try to distract yourself, humming a tune about Nile boats and bad decisions, but a nearby scorpion twitches like it's critiquing your pitch. You sigh, wondering if Hathor, that snack guardian goddess, ever forgives bread thieves. Probably not when Circuit's minions are on patrol. The guard's footsteps fade outside, leaving you with your new roommates. You're not just surviving a punishment, you're surviving Egypt's version of a buggy horror flick, and you're definitely not the hero. Section 5. You're still crouched in that scorpion-infested cell, every nerve on edge as those tiny terrors scuttle around like they're auditioning for a horror flick. The air's thick, the sand's still gritty, and you're pretty sure you'll never look at a beach vacation the same way again. Just when you think you've mastered the art of not screaming, the cell door, or rather, the sand pile blocking it, shifts. The guards are back, their faces as welcoming as a tax audit. They yank you out, not even bothering to check if you've made peace with Circuit's sting squad. You're marched through another torchlit corridor, your legs wobbly from dodging scorpions, and you're wondering if this is the part where things get better. Spoiler, they don't. You're about to meet your next punishment, and it's a real backbreaker, literally. You're led to an open courtyard, the sun blasting down like it's personally offended by your existence. The Nile glitters in the distance, mocking you with its cool, unreachable water. Before you stands a pile of massive limestone blocks, each one looking like it could star in its own pyramid. Your new job. Carry them. One by one, across the courtyard, to a stack that's already taller than you. This isn't just busy work, it's a punishment rooted in Egypt's obsession with cosmic balance. Historical records, like those from Deir el-Medina, show that manual labor, especially stone carrying, was a common penalty for crimes like theft or shirking temple duties. You're not just moving rocks, you're restoring Ma'at, that universal harmony you keep messing up. No pressure, though. Here's the quirky twist, the stones aren't random. Some fringe accounts suggest they were sometimes inscribed with curses or prayers, turning your punishment into a mobile sermon. You squint at the block you're hefting, half expecting to see, "Don't steal bread," carved in hieroglyphs. Instead, it's just heavy, bone-crushingly, soul-suckingly heavy. You stagger under its weight, sand slipping underfoot because, of course, sand's still the MVP of your misery. You mutter, "What's next?" a motivational speech from Anubis, but the guard's glare says humor's not on the menu. You're tempted to drop the stone and sprint for the Nile, but the memory of those scorpions keeps you in line. Barely. Your muscles scream as you shuffle forward, the stone digging into your shoulders. The courtyard's packed with other prisoners, all hauling their own rocks, their faces etched with the universal, "Why did I do this?" look. You catch a glimpse of a guy who looks like he stole 2 loaves, judging by the size of his block. Historians still argue whether stone carrying was purely punitive or doubled as free labor for Pharaoh's projects. Did your sweat help build a temple, or was it just Egypt's way of saying, "Think twice next time"? Either way, you're the one turning into a human forklift, and the gods aren't sending a thank you note. The sun's relentless, baking the sand into a skillet under your feet. You're sweating buckets, and the stone's starting to feel like it's got a personal grudge. You remember that tribunal from Section 3, where Osiris's priests gave you the divine side-eye. This rock-hauling gig feels like their idea of rehabilitation. You'd laugh, but your spine's too busy filing a complaint. The guards watch, sipping water from clay jars, and you're pretty sure one's smirking. You imagine tossing your stone at him, but the thought of Scorpion Cell 2.0 keeps you trudging. Egypt's justice system, where every punishment's a cardio workout with existential dread on the side. You finally reach the stack, dropping your stone with a thud that feels like a small victory. But the guards point to another block, and your heart sinks faster than a papyrus boat in a storm. This isn't a one-and-done deal, it's a marathon. You wipe sweat from your brow, sand sticking to your face like a bad makeup tutorial. You recall that crocodile dung sunscreen gossip from way back, yeah, you'd slather it on if it meant a break from this. The courtyard stretches endlessly, the stones keep coming, and you're starting to think Ma'at's balance is just code for, "Make thieves miserable." You grit your teeth and grab the next block, wondering if the gods ever give out gold stars for effort. Probably not. Section 6. You're staggering back across that sun-scorched courtyard, your shoulders still throbbing from hauling those cursed limestone blocks. The sand's burning through your sandals, and you're pretty sure your sweat could fill the Nile. The guards, lounging in the shade with their smug clay jars, barely glance your way as you drop another stone onto the ever-growing pile. You're hoping for a breather, maybe a "good job, you didn't die" pat on the back, but Egypt's justice system doesn't do warm fuzzies. Instead, they march you out of the courtyard, past the glittering river, and into a new kind of hell, a granary complex, where towering silos loom like silent judges. Your next punishment's about to hit, and it's a masterclass in cruel irony. You're shoved into a small, mud-brick cell tucked between two massive grain stores. The air smells of barley and dust, and through a tiny slit in the wall, you can see heaps of golden wheat, enough to feed a village, or at least make a killer loaf of the bread that got you into this mess. But here's the kicker, you're starving. Your stomach's growling louder than a temple cat, and there's not a crumb in sight. This is no accident. Historical records, like those from the Middle Kingdom, confirm that withholding food near granaries was a deliberate punishment for thieves, especially those who targeted temple stores. You're not just hungry, you're being taunted by the very thing you stole, forced to smell prosperity while your insides stage a revolt. Now, here's the quirky bit. Some fringe tales suggest priests would occasionally slide a single barley grain under the door, not to eat, but to meditate on your greed. You spot a lone grain in the corner, glinting like it's mocking you. You're tempted to eat it, but the thought of a guard catching you and adding "grain theft" to your rap sheet stops you cold. You mutter, "What's next? A lecture from the god of crumbs," but the silence in the cell is your only reply. You're starting to think those scorpions from Section 4 were better company, at least they didn't make you drool over unreachable snacks. The irony's so thick you could spread it on bread, if you had any. You slump against the wall, the mud brick cool but unyielding. Your hunger's not just physical, it's a mental game, gnawing at your willpower. The slit in the wall keeps teasing you with glimpses of the granary's bounty, sacks overflowing, workers hauling baskets like it's a grain party you weren't invited to. Historians still argue whether this punishment was about deterrence or pure sadism. Was it meant to reform you by breaking your spirit, or just to make you suffer for the lols? Either way, you're the one playing Hunger Games with no bow and arrow, and the gods are definitely not team you. The cell's bare, save for that taunting grain and the usual sand dusting the floor, because Egypt's never letting you forget its favorite torture tool. You try to distract yourself, tracing faint scratches on the wall, probably from some other thief who dreamed of a sandwich. Your stomach rumbles again, and you swear you hear a guard chuckle outside. You remember that stone-carrying slog from Section 5, at least then you were too exhausted to notice your hunger. Now, it's front and center, like a bad song stuck in your head. You trade your left sandal for a bite of anything, even that crocodile dung sunscreen you keep hearing about in marketplace gossip. Desperate times, right? You close your eyes, trying to imagine a feast, flatbreads, dates, maybe some Nile fish, but the granary's scent keeps pulling you back to reality. The guards don't check on you, they don't need to. Hunger's doing their job, turning every second into a lesson about don't touch temple stuff. You wonder if Hathor, that snack guardian goddess from the tribunal, is watching, sipping divine wine while you waste away. You'd make a joke about her catering skills, but your dry throat's not cooperating. The cell feels smaller now, the hunger bigger, and you're starting to think Ma'at's balance is just code for starve the chaos out. You curl up, sand crunching, and pray for sleep to mute your stomach's complaints. It's gonna be a long, empty night. Section 7. You're curled up in that granary cell, hunger gnawing at you like a persistent tax collector, the scent of unreachable grain still taunting you through that cruel slit in the wall. Your stomach's protests are the only sound, louder than the distant hum of workers outside. Just when you think you might pass out from sheer desperation, the sand pile at the door shifts. The guards are back, their faces as cheery as a sandstorm. They haul you up, your legs wobbly from starvation, and march you through a maze of corridors that smell faintly of resin and old linen. You're too weak to resist, but a flicker of dread sparks in your chest. Egypt's punishments keep getting weirder, and you're about to discover one that's equal parts terrifying and downright theatrical. You're led into a chamber that feels more like a tomb than a dungeon. The walls are painted with vivid scenes of the underworld, jackal-headed Anubis weighing hearts, Osiris glowering from his throne. The air's heavy with the scent of natron and myrrh, and a stone slab dominates the room, surrounded by jars that look suspiciously like they're prepped for mummification. Your heart skips. You're not dead, yet, but the priests standing nearby, their faces half hidden by linen masks, have other plans. This is the mock mummification punishment, a psychological gut punch for tomb robbers or, apparently, bread thieves like you. Historical texts from the New Kingdom mention this as a rare but chilling deterrent, wrapping the living in bandages to simulate the afterlife's prep, scaring you straight without actually yanking your organs. Here's the quirky bit: some fringe accounts claim the priests would chant fake funerary spells, tossing in your name to make it personal. One priest, his voice low and creepy, starts muttering about your soul's journey to the field of reeds, mispronouncing your name like he's reading it off a soggy papyrus. You'd laugh, because, really, get it right, but the bandages they're wrapping around your arms are too tight for comedy. The linen's coarse, smelling of salt and herbs, and every loop feels like a countdown to eternity. You're not actually getting mummified, but the vibe's so convincing you're half-checking for Anubis in the corner. Joke's on you for thinking hunger was the worst Egypt could dish out. You squirm, but the priest's grips are firm, their eyes glinting with that "we're saving Ma'at" zeal. The slab's cold against your back, and the bandages are creeping up to your chest now. You catch a glimpse of a bronze tool on a nearby table, probably just for show, but it's giving major organ scoop energy. Historians still argue whether mock mummifications were purely theatrical or had a ritual purpose, like cleansing your chaotic soul. Either way, you're the star of this morbid play, and the audience, aka the gods, isn't clapping. You try to focus on something else, like that lone barley grain from section 6, but the memory just makes your stomach lurch. The priests keep chanting, their voices droning like a lullaby from the underworld. You're wrapped just enough to feel trapped but not enough to suffocate. Egypt's justice system knows how to toe the line. The natron sting on your skin reminds you of that sandy cell from way back, except this time, the grit's part of the performance. You trade this for another round with circuit scorpions or even those limestone blocks. At least those didn't make you question your mortality. You mutter, "Can we skip to the part where I'm not a mummy burrito?" But the priests ignore you, too busy channeling Osiris's HR department. The chamber's walls seem to close in, the painted gods watching like they're taking bets on your panic level. You remember that tribunal from section 3, where Osiris's priests gave you the divine stink eye. This feels like their idea of escalation. The bandages stop at your shoulders, and the priests step back, leaving you to stew in your linen cocoon. The silence is worse than the chants, giving you plenty of time to imagine your actual mummification someday. You'd kill for that crocodile dung sunscreen right now, not for sun protection, but just to feel alive. The guards finally untie you, but the message is clear: steal again, and the next wrapping might not be a rehearsal. You stumble out, heart pounding, wondering what fresh nightmare Egypt's got next. Section 8. You're still shaky from that mock mummification, the phantom itch of linen bandages lingering on your skin as the guards hustle you out of that tomb-like chamber. The air shifts, carrying a faint whiff of river mud and something sharper, almost reptilian. Your heart's barely settled from imagining Anubis's guest list, and now you're being marched toward a part of the dungeon that feels different. The corridors widen, the walls damp and streaked with moss, and you hear an unsettling splash in the distance, like something big just slid into water. The guards' usual boredom is gone, they're gripping their spears tighter, and you're picking up serious, "we're not paid enough for this" vibes. You're about to confront one of Egypt's most infamous dungeon rumors, the crocodile pit. But is it real, or just pharaoh-grade propaganda? You're led to a massive stone ledge overlooking a sunken pit, its edges slick with algae. Below, the water churns, and you catch glimpses of scaly backs and yellow eyes breaking the surface. Crocodiles. Actual, honest to Sobek crocodiles, lounging like they own the place. Your stomach drops faster than a papyrus boat in a storm. Historical records are murky here. Some texts from the late period hint at crocodile pits as execution sites for traders or tomb robbers, but hard evidence is scarce. Temples dedicated to Sobek, the crocodile god, often kept sacred crocs, so it's not a stretch to think they'd repurpose a few for justice. Still, you're hoping this is just a scare tactic, because those jaws look like they don't do warning bites. Here's the quirky bit: some fringe stories claim the crocs weren't always hungry, they were overfed to make them lazy, turning the pit into more of a psychological trap than a death sentence. You peer down, noticing one croc yawning, its teeth glinting like a dentist's worst nightmare. You mutter, "What, did they cater a Nile buffet?" But the guard's glare says you're not funny. The priests nearby, draped in Sobek's green amulets, chant about divine retribution, and you're starting to think this is less about punishment and more about keeping Sobek's pets entertained. You're not keen on being their chew toy, fed or not. The pit's edge is close, too close, and the guards nudge you forward, their spears poking your back. You're not getting tossed in, yet, but the threat's clear: one wrong move, and you're croc chow. The water's murky, hiding who knows how many reptiles, and every ripple makes you flinch. Historians still argue whether crocodile pits were real or just myths spun to terrify Egypt's enemies and keep thieves like you in line. Were they practical, using temple crocs for cleanup, or pure propaganda, like the ancient equivalent of "beware of dog" signs? Either way, you're the one sweating, and Sobek's not sending you a sympathy card. You try to focus on the ledge's slimy texture underfoot, anything to distract from those eyes staring up at you. The priest's chants are getting louder, and you catch your name thrown in. Great, even the crocs know you're the bread thief. You remember that mock mummification from Section 7, this feels like the sequel nobody asked for. You trade this for another round of hunger pangs or even circuit scorpions. At least those didn't have teeth the size of your hand. You mutter, "Can we go back to the sand spa?" But the guards aren't in the mood for your stand-up routine. The air's thick with the pit stench, mud, decay, and something distinctly croc-ish. You spot a bone half submerged in the water, and your imagination goes full horror flick. Is it human? Animal? You're not sticking around to find out. The priests pause their chanting, and one steps forward, holding a Sobek amulet like it's a backstage pass to the underworld. He says your crime, yep, still that bread, has angered the river gods, and this pit's your warning. You nod like you're totally reformed, but you're mostly just trying not to faint. You recall that crocodile dung sunscreen gossip from ages ago. Right now, you'd bathe in it if it meant getting out of here. The guards finally pull you back from the ledge, but the croc's eyes follow you, glinting like they're bookmarking you for later. You're marched away, legs like jelly, the pit's splashy echoes haunting your steps. You're not sure if it was real or a mind game, but Egypt's got you second-guessing every ripple in the Nile. You're alive, for now, but the dungeon's got more tricks, and you're not exactly thrilled for the next act. Section 9. You're still reeling from that crocodile pit stare down, your heart pounding like it's trying to escape your chest as the guards march you away from the slimy ledge. The air shifts from swampy to stale, the damp mossy walls giving way to dry, crumbling stone. You're back in the dungeon's depths, but the echoes of those croc splashes linger, making every drip in the corridor sound like a toothy RSVP. The guards shove you into a new cell, this one so small you can touch both walls without stretching. The door, yep, another sand pile, seals you in, and then, nothing. No scorpions, no stones, no priests chanting your sins. Just silence, thick and suffocating, like the dungeon's holding its breath. Welcome to your next punishment, solitary confinement, Egypt style, where the quiet is louder than any crocodile's snap. This cell's a masterclass in minimalism. No windows, no etchings, just smooth stone that seems to swallow sound. You try humming, but your voice dies flat, like the walls are allergic to noise. Historical records, like those from the Amarna period, suggest soundproof cells were used for high-profile troublemakers, think rebellious nobles or, apparently, bread thieves who keep dodging Ma'at. The goal? Break your spirit without lifting a finger. You're alone with your thoughts, and trust me, they're not throwing you a party. The silence presses in, heavy as those limestone blocks from Section 5, and you're starting to miss the scorpion's scuttle. At least they were company. Here's the quirky bit: some fringe tales claim priests would slip cursed amulets into these cells, tiny trinkets meant to make you paranoid about divine wrath. You spot something glinting in the corner, a small ankh pendant, half buried in the sand. Is it a curse? A prank? You're not touching it, but your brain's already spiraling, wondering if Osiris is scheduling you for an afterlife audit. You mutter, "Great, now I'm scared of jewelry," but the silence eats your words. The cell's so quiet you hear your own heartbeat, and it's not exactly singing lullabies. You're tempted to bang on the walls, but the last guy who tried probably got a crocodile pit encore, so you sit tight. You slump against the stone, the sand floor crunching faintly, Egypt's favorite torture tool, making a cameo even here. The isolation's doing its job, turning every second into a mental marathon. You try counting scratches on the wall, but there's nothing, not even a "Kilroy was here," to keep you sane. Historians still argue whether these silent cells were for punishment or meditation. Were you supposed to reflect on your crimes or just lose your marbles? Either way, you're the guinea pig, and your thoughts are starting to sound like a bad podcast hosted by your regrets. You remember that mock mummification from Section 7, this feels like its quieter, creepier cousin. The silence isn't just empty, it's alive, poking at every dumb choice you've made. You replay that bread theft, wondering if you could have just apologized to Hathor instead. You even miss the granary cell's hunger pangs, at least they gave you something to focus on. Now, it's just you, the ankh, and a whole lot of what-ifs. You trade this for another round with Sobek's crocs, or even that tribunal's feather-tossing priests. You mutter, "Can someone at least chant something?" but the walls stay mute. You're starting to think Ma'at's balance means balancing your sanity on a knife's edge. You shift, sand sticking to your skin like a clingy X. The ankh in the corner keeps glinting, and you're half convinced it's judging you. You recall that crocodile dung sunscreen gossip. Right now, you'd slather it on just to feel something other than this oppressive quiet. The cell's not just a cage, it's a mirror, forcing you to face yourself, and spoiler, you're not loving the view. You close your eyes, hoping sleep will hit the mute button on your brain. But the silence follows, relentless, and you're left wondering if the gods are watching, or if they've just left you to marinate in your own chaos. Either way, Egypt's dungeon is winning this round, and you're just trying to keep your sanity from checking out. Section 10. You're still trapped in that suffocating silent cell, the kind of quiet that makes your own breathing sound like a Nile barge horn. The ankh pendant in the corner hasn't moved, but you're pretty sure it's plotting something. Just when you're about to start a one-sided argument with the walls, the sand pile at the door shifts. The guards are back, their faces as welcoming as a tax collector's scroll. They yank you out, and you're almost grateful, until you see where you're headed. The corridor's narrow, the air sharp with the smell of charred papyrus and something faintly metallic. You're about to face your next punishment, and it's got a fiery twist that makes those scorpions from Section 4 seem like cuddly pets. You're led to a small, open-air court, the walls blackened by years of smoke. In the center, a bronze brazier glows with embers, and a priest stands nearby, holding a roll of papyrus that looks suspiciously like it's meant for more than reading. This is the burning papyrus punishment, a favorite for petty criminals who need a quick lesson in shame. Historical records from the New Kingdom mention this as a non-lethal branding method: hot papyrus applied briefly to the skin, leaving a mark that screams, "Don't try this again." You're not getting a full-on bonfire, but the glowing scroll in the priest's hand is giving you serious, "this is gonna sting" vibes. You swallow hard, wishing you'd stayed in that silent cell. Here's the quirky bit: some fringe sources say the papyrus was inscribed with the criminal's name or crime, turning the burn into a literal badge of dishonor. You squint at the priest's scroll, half expecting to see bread thief in fancy hieroglyphs. Instead, it's just smoldering, and the priest's muttering about Ma'at like it's his personal catchphrase. You mutter, "Can't you just tweet my shame instead?" But the guard's spear says sarcasm's not on the menu. The heat from the brazier's already making you sweat, and you're starting to think those crocodile pit crocs were less intimidating. At least they didn't come with a side of third-degree burns. The priest steps closer, the papyrus glowing like a tiny, angry sun. You're tied to a wooden post, because Egypt loves its drama, and the crowd of onlookers, mostly other prisoners and bored guards, watches with grim curiosity. The burn's not meant to kill, just humiliate, but your skin's not exactly thrilled about the distinction. Historians still argue whether this punishment was about public shaming or divine cleansing. Did the fire purify your chaos, or just make you a walking cautionary tale? Either way, you're the one about to get a permanent souvenir, and the gods aren't handing out aloe vera. The papyrus touches your arm, and it's like a wasp sting crossed with a bad sunburn. You grit your teeth, refusing to give the crowd the satisfaction of a yelp. The priest pulls back, leaving a red, hieroglyph-shaped welt that'll probably scar. You catch a glimpse of it. Yep, it's an ankh, because Egypt's irony game is undefeated. You remember that creepy ankh pendant from Section 9, now you're wearing its cousin. You'd laugh, but your arm's too busy screaming. The priest drones on about your debt to Hathor, and you're tempted to ask if she accepts apologies in bread form. Spoiler, she doesn't. The crowd disperses, and the guards untie you, their boredom back in full force. Your arm throbs, the burn a constant reminder of your cosmic screw-up. You're marched back toward the dungeon, the brazier's smoke still clinging to your clothes. You think back to that mock mummification or even the granary starvation. Those were bad, but this public roast hits different. You trade it for another round with Sobek's crocs, or even that silent cell's mind games. You mutter, "Next time, I'm stealing papyrus-free snacks," but the guards don't care. You recall that crocodile dung sunscreen gossip. Right now, you'd slather it on just to cool the burn. The corridor's cool stone feels like a small mercy against your skin, but the welt's a nagging lecturer, preaching about Ma'at with every pulse. You're not sure what's next, but Egypt's dungeon playlist is clearly on shuffle, and every track's a banger in the worst way. You shuffle along, sand crunching underfoot, bracing for whatever fresh hell the gods have queued up. One thing's clear, your bread-stealing days are over, unless the next punishment involves a bakery. Section 11. You're trudging back through the dungeon's corridors, your arms still throbbing from that glowing papyrus burn, the ankh-shaped welt a stinging reminder of Egypt's flair for dramatic justice. The air's thick with dust and the faint echo of your own regrets, and the guard spears prod you along like you're a particularly unmotivated camel. You're hoping for a break, maybe a nap, or at least a cell without scorpions or fire, but Egypt's punishment playlist doesn't do intermissions. You're led to an open workyard, the sun glaring down like it's got a personal grudge. Piles of flint and wood surround you, and you realize your next punishment isn't about pain, it's about endless, soul-crushing labor, crafting tools for an eternity you're not sure you'll survive. You're handed a chipped flint knife and pointed to a stack of cedar logs. Your job? Carve them into handles for picks and chisels, the kind used in tombs or temples. This isn't just busy work, it's a punishment steeped in irony. Historical records from the Ramesside period show that forcing criminals to craft afterlife tools, like those for tomb builders, was a way to make you serve the very system you disrupted. You, the bread thief, are now prepping tools for the gods' eternal workforce. Every slice of that flint feels like you're carving your own cosmic detention slip, and the sun's making sure you sweat through every second. Here's the quirky bit. Some fringe accounts suggest the tools you're making might be cursed, destined to follow you into the afterlife as a reminder of your crimes. You eye the log you're whittling, half expecting it to sprout hieroglyphs saying, "Property of loser." You mutter, "What's next, a cursed spatula?" but the overseer's whip crack says humor's not on the schedule. Your hands are already blistering, the flint slipping with every cut, and you're starting to think those scorpions from Section 4 were less demanding. At least they didn't expect you to moonlight as a carpenter with zero training. The workyard's buzzing with other prisoners, all hunched over their own piles of wood or stone, their faces etched with exhaustion. You spot a guy who looks like he stole a whole bakery, judging by the mountain of handles he's churned out. Historians still argue whether this labor was purely punitive or doubled as free labor for Pharaoh's projects. Were you just suffering, or helping build someone's eternal penthouse? Either way, your arms ache, your blisters sting, and the cedar's splintery attitude isn't helping. You remember that burning papyrus from Section 10, this feels like its slower, sweatier cousin, grinding you down one splinter at a time. You hack at the log, wood chips flying like tiny accusations. The overseer paces, barking orders in a voice that could wake a mummy. You're supposed to shape each handle perfectly, but your hands are shaking, and the flint's about as cooperative as a hungover scribe. You trade this for another round with Sobek's Crocs or even that Silent Cell's creepy Ankh. You mutter, "Can't I just apologize to Hathor with a nice letter?" But the overseer's glare says you're stuck in tool-making purgatory. The irony's brutal, you stole bread to survive, and now you're crafting tools for an afterlife you're not sure you'll enjoy. The sun dips lower, but the work doesn't stop. Your pile of finished handles is pitiful, and the overseer's not impressed. You recall that crocodile dung sunscreen gossip. Right now, you'd slather it on just to escape the heat and splinters. The workyard's relentless, each cut a reminder of Ma'at's balance and your knack for throwing it off. You glance at the other prisoners, their heads bowed, and wonder if they're dreaming of freedom or just a splinter-free nap. You keep carving, the flint biting your fingers, knowing this labor's not just about tools, it's about etching regret into your bones. Egypt's dungeon doesn't mess around, and you're learning that the hard way, one handle at a time. Section 12. You're still in that blister-inducing workyard, your hands raw from carving cedar handles, the flint knife now feeling like an extension of your misery. The sun's finally dipped below the horizon, but the overseer's whip cracks keep the workyard humming under torchlight. Your pile of tool handles is growing, but so is your exhaustion, and you're pretty sure Ma'at's balance is laughing at your calluses. Just when you think you'll collapse into a splintery heap, the guards yank you away from the logs and march you back into the dungeon's depths. The air turns cool and heavy, smelling of incense and old stone, and you're bracing for something new. Egypt's punishments never repeat, but they always find a way to top themselves. This time, it's not your body they're after, it's your mind. You're led into a dimly lit chamber, its walls covered in swirling hieroglyphs that seem to pulse in the flickering lamplight. A priest awaits, his leopard skin robe giving off serious, "I talk to gods" vibes. No brazier, no scorpions, just him, a clay tablet, and a stare that could make Anubis flinch. This is the priest's psychological torment, a punishment designed to unravel your sanity with fear and divine guilt trips. Historical records from the New Kingdom mention priests using rituals to correct chaotic souls, blending spiritual threats with mind games to keep offenders in line. You're about to get a front row seat to Egypt's version of therapy, and it's not exactly warm and fuzzy. Here's the quirky bit: some fringe sources claim priests would read your fate from sacred texts, slipping in fake prophecies to make you paranoid. The priest in front of you starts chanting from his tablet, his voice low and hypnotic, saying your bread theft has cursed your Ka, your soul's twin, to wander the underworld hungry. You mutter, "My Ka's on a diet anyway," but his glare shuts you up. He leans closer, describing visions of you lost in a desert of jackals, and you're starting to wonder if he's making it up or if Osiris really has it out for you. It's like a fortune teller crossed with a horror storyteller, and you're the unlucky client. You shift on the stone floor, the sand, because, of course, sand's here too, gritting under you. The priest's words dig deeper, painting vivid pictures of divine wrath, your name erased from tombs, your afterlife demoted to eternal dish scrubber. Your rational side says it's just talk, but the chamber's vibe, with its shadowy god staring from the walls, makes you doubt. Historians still argue whether these psychological torments were about reform or control. Did priests want to save your soul, or just scare you into submission? Either way, you're sweating, and it's not from the heat. You remember that burning papyrus from section 10, this feels like its sneakier sibling, burning your mind instead of your skin. The priest pulls out a small amulet, shaped like a scarab, and says it's your last chance to appease Hathor. You're tempted to ask if it comes with a gift receipt, but the way he's gripping that tablet says jokes are a bad idea. He tells you to confess every crime, every single one, or the gods will know. You start babbling about the bread, maybe a fig you borrowed last year, anything to stop his creepy chant. You trade this for another round of tool carving or even Sobek's crocs. The priest's eyes narrow, like he's reading your soul's browser history, and you're half convinced he's got a direct line to Osiris. The chamber feels smaller now, the hieroglyphs closing in like a cosmic jury. You recall that crocodile dung sunscreen gossip. Right now, you'd slather it on just to snap out of this mental spiral. The priest finally stops, leaving you with a warning, one more slip, and you're cause toast. You're marched out, head spinning, the torchlight blurring as his words echo. Egypt's not just punishing your body, it's remodeling your psyche, and you're not loving the new decor. You stumble along, sand crunching, wondering if you'll ever outrun your own guilt, or if the gods are just warming up.